Hi, everyone, and welcome back to BakedHR. My name is Jasmine here, and I'm here with my co-host, Christina. How are you doing, Christina?
I'm doing great tonight. Jasmine, how are you?
I am doing good. I am ready for this episode. I feel like we will both learn a lot in this one. So I'm ready for this episode.
I agree. I am so glad that we have Natasha with us tonight. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience?
All right. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I watched the show, even though it competes with my Real Housewives of everything. But I forgive you all. So my name is Natasha Desjardins. I am an HR generalist of about a little bit over a decade, or should I say 10 years? Does that age me? No, it doesn't, but yeah. I have worked in both the for-profit and nonprofit industry. And more specifically, I have been working in, well, as of recently, I've transitioned into a specific industry of HR, which is focusing on the employee experience within the organization. So it's a kind of like a combination of employee experience, wellness, and DEI, everyone's favorite, right?
Nice. So that actually is like the best part of HR, in my opinion. I mean, because, I separate recruiting out of that umbrella. Otherwise, I would say recruiting. But I think that that is my favorite part. And I think that that is a role where we can really highlight and emphasize that HR isn't just for the protection of the company. Like, we are here to serve the employees and try to strike that balance. So I am excited about what you do. And I know we've gotten to know you. We probably met online, and we've gotten to know you online and offline. And I know we've all had, several work-related conversations. And it became apparent to us that you are really passionate about employee resource groups and companies doing them well. And I think that you have good perspective from an employee perspective and from hey, this is what goes on behind the scenes to make sure that companies give those groups what they need. So let's just start with the basics for anyone who doesn't know. Can you tell us what an employee resource group is?
So an employee resource group is a network. It's a group. It's a network comprised of different groups, and it could be groups of the same community. It could be a professional development group. It could be, an event group. However, employees choose to gather under those resources. But in essence, employee resource groups are a network that allow for like-minded employees within an organization to network and come together for the various programmings that I mentioned above. So it is a company-sponsored program under the realm of employee resource groups. But for me personally, I always say that employee resource groups are not new to the organization or to the corporate world. Employees have been coming together prior to these groups being formalized, right? And so organizations actually formalizing these types of groups or having an employee resource program within the organization only further supports an organization's stance on diversity within the organization, on inclusivity, on belonging within the organization. And it kind of sends a message to employees that we don't just see you as a bottom line. We don't just see you as coming in and getting to work, but we also want you to be able to find time to meet with fellow colleagues in a way that further promotes and aligns with the organizational goals, however employees choose to use that time.
And I really like that because, as you said, employees have been doing this beforehand. A lot of times they have had to, do the brunt work of getting groups together. And, to some people, it might look a little shady or, oh, these people over here meeting. But I think having that backing from corporate directly brings so much more light to the conversations that are being had. It allows people to maybe be a little bit more open about it, be more willing to go into those conversations. And so with the employee resource programs, like, who would you say in an organization owns that? Because a lot of things fall under HR that technically probably shouldn't be owned by HR. So okay, Christina.
So
I don't know why, but party planning came to my mind when you said that. Like that's why I made that face.
That's a great question. That is a great question. I think it depends on the organization and how they're structured. In a sense that if you have a smaller to mid-sized organization where you do not have a DEI department or focus, then in a way that role does kind of fall under HR, because who else wants to take on that additional work of supervising a culture? You know what, Christina, don't get me started.
No, I'm gonna just let you finish. And then I have like 100 follow-up questions already.
I know. Am I gonna make it out of this like interview alive?
Oh yeah, no,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay,
For
so
sure.
yeah, I mean, and you can't really, from my perspective of working with ERGs and my experience, I can't quite blame employees who don't want to take on that load. And then if you have an organization that is a little bit more structured, and this is my own personal opinion, that ERG role falls under the DEI department, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion department. And quite frankly, I think that ERGs are a bleed off or are reflective of an organization that already has a diversity, equity, and inclusion program that is working within the organization. It's kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg?
Well, yeah, well, so that's exactly what I want to get to the bottom of. Because, okay, so I'm going to back up just a little bit. I'm going to tell you about my one and only experience with an ERG, and then you can tell me all the things that we did wrong, because I want people to get it right. So I worked for, I think there was about 1,100 employees probably. Maybe somewhere between 200 and 300 of those people were young professionals, which we qualified as, I think, 35 and under, or maybe it was under 35. Like once you hit 35, we kicked you out of the group. And it came to be because,
by the way. Take them out of the group once they're
yeah, well, see, what happens when you put someone in HR as part of the group leadership, I have access to everyone's date of birth. So I just, your birthday, happy birthday, start the old folks group, I guess. I don't know. We didn't know what we were doing. Okay. We just picked a number. And obviously I was younger because like now I'm 35, so I wouldn't be in that group. But it came to be because me and a fellow employee who was an engineer, a technical person in that organization, were like, this is a need we see. How do we get it? So, and what happened is he came to me because I was the HR person he trusted. And so I went over to my boss because he had a really good understanding of how things worked in the organization. So like, how would we accomplish this? Is this something that leadership is going to bless, or is this something we just kind of have to do on our own time and make sure that like we don't take up company space when we do it, you know? And so we ended up roping someone else into it to start it. So 3 of us started it together. And when we took it to leadership, like we had created this whole program about, you know, why to do it. And from an HR perspective, from a recruiting perspective specifically, it was something I was really excited to roll out because we were trying to solve a retention problem of our young professionals. And what we kept finding is like, they weren't building roots in our location, in our area. So they weren't just like leaving us at a certain mark, they were leaving the area. And so we wanted to figure out how can we help them, you know, plant some roots and want to stay longer. And then, you know, these engineers also wanted this group. And so it made sense for all of us to form it together. We did a whole presentation. We put together a charter. We all signed it. We had like this is our calendar of events. This is what we're going to do. We got a budget. Honestly, like we didn't know what we were doing at all. And they gave us a budget anyway. And that was great. And leadership blessed it. But I heard later after I left that there were other groups that tried to get like funding and stuff like that for different types of ERG. And I don't really know like the different avenues that they were trying to go through. But, you know, it seems like there has to be that interest from the employees and the blessing from leadership, like at the same time. So if someone has an interest and they're not in HR, or there's a group that is needed that maybe the DEI person hasn't thought of yet, like what's the right thing to do? Like if you have that curiosity and you want to just at least find out how you could set one up, like where do most people start who don't have a relationship with HR?
I think that the first place to start, I think once you have identified the need for ERGs, and it seems as though, as you talked, it started off with just one ERG, and you had to be 35 and under to join that ERG. And just listening to you speak about it, for me, my mind goes to, you know, the different groups that are represented at your organization, right? I think that once the need has been identified, it is up to leadership and HR to determine, okay, hey, if we are going to bless this program, what are the parameters under which they can operate, right? And for our organization, again, the first organization that I worked with that actually put together ERGs, they determined 3 categories under which an ERG can be formed. And again, it was events where, hey, if you want to hold, if you are like events in terms of like, let's say for instance, a group of employees say, hey, we just want to create one event a year and it's around, you know, awareness to certain stuff. That is an event ERG. Then you have the group ERGs where generally you'll find the Black employees ERG, the Latinx Hispanic ERGs, the Asian ERGs, LGBTQIA ERGs. And then you have the programs, which could also be like more of your professional development ERGs by way of women in technology or girls who can code. And whatever variations. And I think that once we establish like how these groups would govern themselves, we put out a call across the organization, and there was a form you had to fill out, and the form pretty much asked specific questions. Why do you want to form an ERG? What will the name of your ERG be? Who will your ERG leaders be? You had to have 1 or 2 leaders, and just other things that the reviewing committee would look at to say, okay, yes, you meet the requirements that we have, that we communicated, and there you have it. You do now have an ERG. And then from that, our ERG leads then become part of what we call an ERG council. And on however long basis that they meet, they make decisions around how the ERG will continue to operate or how the collective budget is used, but each individual ERG has a specified budget. And I don't think that the organization itself should say, these are the types of ERGs we want to see. You should make it an open call, because you'll be surprised to know what types of employees would come forward and say, hey, I want to create an ERG. One of the organizations that I work for that had an ERG, we had a Care Caucus and Care Caucus ERG, which was highly represented by either employees who took care, who looked after elderly parents or senior persons. And then you also had the parents, people who have either kids in their guardianship or have their own biological kids or adoptive kids, what have you. And they came together as a group, and a lot of their functionalities there, they operate around coming together to, have events around either the woos or celebrating being parents or caregivers, but also being able to advocate for their needs in terms of, hey, we're still navigating COVID. What does that look like for the caregiver who is at the organization 9 to 5? However, during those 9 to 5, I'm employee, I'm mom, I'm dad, I'm teacher, I am a better looking cafeteria lady or man, nicer, I am, all of that. I don't know. I didn't go to high school in the US. I've just always heard stories about the mean cafeteria person. I'm sorry to the cafeteria people out there. It's American media, man. It's your TVs. That's how it
works. Okay. So this is
okay.
No. Okay. All right. First of all, I love this because I think like you're giving a lot of really great examples to get like ideas going, because I think people just think, oh, it's like a Black women group or the Asians at work, or, like a very specific, like built around race. And I never really thought ours could count as an ERG because it was just for young professionals in general. There wasn't really, but when you went through all of your examples, like we did a lot of professional development, we did a lot of fun things after work, we did, whatever, but here's the rest of that story. And I want to get your reaction and
just before you tell me the rest of that story. So I guess for me, what I would like to see and like to let out there is that for your organization right there, it should have been beyond age 35, right? And how did y'all even get away with that? Where were the 35 and overs? But that's another story for another time.
Well, I know work is completely different, but especially here in North Alabama, there are a lot of organizations and even employer organizations that have young professional based topics or themes, and a lot of them cap it at 32, 35 years old.
Yeah. But one thing, and this is the main thing that I really wanted to get out there, is like one of the things that I really want to see is for someone to step up and say, I want to have an ERG for the 40 and up, for the 50 and up, and a lot of our more seasoned colleagues. Because one of the things that organizations as a whole are very bad at doing is we're not great, but we're doing better at talking about professional development for Gen Z, for millennials coming up, succession planning. But far too often, we do not talk about what that next phase of transition looks for that more seasoned career person. What does that transition look for you, other than what are the other options other than retirement, right? And so oftentimes we have people who stay at organizations for 30, 40, 50 years, and people are just like, so when do you plan on retiring? Well, can we have another conversation with them? What does that look like for them? You've been in your role for 30 years. Are you happy? Would you like to try something else across the organization? What have you? And so for me, I think that having an ERG around those topics will definitely, having an ERG specifically for that age group or people approaching that age group will allow for better advocacy for them. They are a silent majority. And I think that there is a lot of fear and concerns about approaching that conversation, those topics with them, because a lot of organizations don't want to be hit with lawsuits in terms of, okay, we're trying to get you to retire early or leave the organization early. But does that mean that we also ignore them? And so I think that if you are in HR or a supporting role, or if you even see this video and you are age 50, start an ERG around that, so that you can really talk about those issues within your organization, how it impacts your colleagues. And also being able to advocate for yourself and your colleagues, rather than sitting back and just collecting that check. Your employee experience matters too.
Yeah, they sprinkle a little bit of money on them and say, oh, well, you've been here for 30 years. Here's a plaque. And An extra $10.
I mean, I don't think all companies go as far as a plaque. I think it's more of a certificate.
What
You can buy your own plaque.
what happened to like nice watches and stuff like that? That's not a thing anymore. I wouldn't know. Okay, listen.
COVID, it's not.
I've got to clear the air. We were able to get away with that age group because we were focusing on a specific issue.
Yeah.
It did create a lot of opportunity for a lot of conversation though around what do people need after 35, and we didn't formally kick people out. We just kind of started there because we didn't know, we really didn't know what we were doing. We were just kind of testing it out. And it was an organization where there were a lot of people who stayed there for 30 years. And so I think that a lot of those employees were really excited to see this younger group stand up because it wasn't the same as when they were that age. Because they're like, we didn't leave, we're still here. We love this place and we've been here for 30 years. What the heck is happening? And so I think they just saw it as a really good resource. And there were so many opportunities for them to come in and be a part of the group, whether it was like we set up mentoring or lunch and learn sessions with some of the more experienced folks who have either like climbed the ladder or got to work on really cool projects or, whatever. We did financial planning. We did like so many things that, and then plenty of people joked that they were going to start an older professionals group and they just never did. And so like, I just think like none of us could champion that for them. They had to start their own group, But what got really weird was, the HR director at the time, she wanted to be involved in all of the communications and she wanted me to report back everything that we did to her. This wasn't a requirement from the C-suite, and the C-suite is who blessed the going forward of the program. And I couldn't wait for my time on the board to be done because I felt like she was treating me as an HR person who was going to spy on the group. You know what I mean? Like, yes. So I felt like it also hindered my ability to advocate for other ERGs to happen. Because I thought if this is just the case, like if you guys are going to present this, like, this is a great thing, you should get involved, but then have someone like monitoring and reporting back. Like if you treat people like adults, they'll typically act like adults. So just let us be. And if there's a problem, then we'll solve that problem when it comes up, but don't go looking for stuff that's not even there yet.
I would say that the organization that I work for, and the ERG actually reported into HR. That HR, the head of HR, just wanted, initially when it first kicked off, set in on a few meetings, but I would say that the organization was great at letting it know that it was, while it was company sponsored, it was employee ran. And because we had so many, I would say, groups of diverse backgrounds that really, and all of their missions were, we want to create safe spaces for us to come together and just be around each other, not have to code switch, just be ourselves, celebrate our culture. A way for us to be able to discuss corporate matters that affect us. I think that the organization was very respectful towards ERGs and never really hovered over like that or expected, reporting on anything beyond, is there anything that I really need to know? So that would be budget wise or event wise or anything wherein the ERG council would determine, okay, we want leadership in so that we can address certain issues. And I think that is a great approach for other organizations to take. Even though the ERG coordinator, the person who coordinated all of the ERG councils, was in HR. I also held a position as ERG lead, and I am also in HR. I was very, as a leader, I was very intentional in all of my communications, and I did not have to run any of my communications past my department, but any communication that might seem a little bit, well, any communication that I would say necessitated that for me to say that this is not, I'm not speaking, well, let's just say that in certain communications, I had to specify at the header, and it wasn't something that the organization told me to do or my department to do, but I always chose to specify asterisk, I am sending this email in my capacity of ERG leader and not as an HR professional, meaning that it's not coming from my head of department, it's not coming from my department, it's not coming from leadership. This is something that myself and my colleagues have determined. And so I think that organizations, if you have already blessed the program and given the parameters around which an ERG should operate, let the employees be, because regardless, ERG or not, we're still talking behind the scenes. We're still doing what we have to do. So rather than looking like a cop, allow employees to just be. Because ultimately, if you are creating these resource groups to improve diversity, to improve inclusion or belonging, especially in larger organizations. And oftentimes in a lot of these larger organizations, when these ERGs come together and meet, a lot of people are coming in and saying, this is so great to be around other people who look like me. I'm the only one in my department. I'm the only one on my team. Oftentimes this is the only opportunity that this team member has, to really feel like they belong. And you don't want to shatter that experience by expecting for every single detail to be reported back into you.
Yeah.
I like that. I think that's solid advice.
So, and this is to me a great follow-up question for what you just said. So for ERGs, what would you say is the difference between having a truly successful ERG in an organization and one that is just checking the box to look good to the community or to look good to employees, but aren't actually, really doing the work or backing the employees behind the scenes?
I would say fully successful ERG programs is, first of all, allowing the employees to run with the program and creating events and programmings that are of interest to them. And I say this because I remember last year with everything that transpired in 2020 with the murder of George Floyd, with the racial and physical attacks against Asian Americans or people of Asian descent in the US, and so many more of these incidents. A lot of us as ERG members and ERG groups felt that the responsibility was on us to create programming, awareness, education, do something. So we were part supporting our own, creating, safe spaces for us to be able to come and talk about how we're experiencing the workplace and how the events of outside are affecting our day to day, but at the same time responsible for explaining to the next colleague that is not part of those groups why we feel the way we feel, or, just the responsibility that always falls on minorities. And then just we saw it as an opportunity for us to be out there and educate and really talk about how we felt. And one day I remember one of my colleagues hit me up and said, Natasha, the ERGs is not for them, it's for us. We can't keep on spending our resources to bring in speakers to help them understand how to be better allies. Those resources are supposed to go to us, for us to be able to continue to support each other, to promote professional development within our groups and everything else that we wanted to. And it made me think about like, wow, you know, a successful ERG program has to be not only blessed by the organization, but financially supported by the organization. And by financially supported by the organization, give these ERGs enough of a budget for them to be able to respectfully hire speakers and presenters to come do work within the organization. Because oftentimes, let's say if the ERG is a race ERG, like let's say I'm a Black woman and I am the ERG leader of, you know, Black identifying employees within my organization. More than likely, when I reach out to an external speaker, I'm going to reach out to someone who looks like us, who understands us, who speaks our language, who has gone through our same traumas and pains or what have you. But now having to, as a Black woman, go to another Black person and say, hey, come speak to my ERG, but you have to do it for free, or you have to do it for an honorarium of $100 or $200. It does not promote the goals, and it really does not promote, you know, the messaging that a lot of organizations put behind being equitable to disadvantaged communities or marginalized communities, because now you're forcing your employees to try to get someone's skill sets at a discount or limit the type of resources or type of events that they can have simply because they don't have the money to the budget to support the needs of the community. So I would definitely say a successful ERG is definitely giving your employees the leeway to lead their ERGs as needed for their, you know, ERG group, for their members. Secondly, making sure that they are financed, that they have a respectful and equitable, you know, budget to be able to, you know, fund their programmings. And lastly, ERGs are not here to replace, you know, a well-run and oiled diversity, equity, and inclusion program. Because when you do that, what you're doing is forcing marginalized employees, again, to do the work for free. And if you ask them, there are a lot of them that will let you know that there are plenty of things that we've built for free. And your DEI program is not going to be one of them. So fund your ERG programs.
But I really do feel like a lot of organizations, well, not a lot, there are organizations out there who feel like they can have one or the other. They don't need to have both. And having an ERG is enough to say, well, this is our DEI initiative, and this is all that we need to do as an organization.
Well, and I think like going back to the beginning, like having that foundation up front of like, hey, we're going to have this committee that reviews ERGs, that sets up the parameters of which an ERG can operate within. I think that helps organizations have that mindset of we're taking on the whole puzzle. We're not doing one or the other, or we're not substituting, we're not scrambling and letting this ERG replace our DEI so that our recruiters can go to a career fair in 3 months and say, these are the ERGs that we have within our organization, and not know that they haven't been able to have an event together because they didn't have funding, or they haven't had to have a quality speaker because they couldn't hire anyone. And quite frankly, we're all past the point of doing stuff for free for each other. Like, this is ridiculous. So I really like how you tie this all up. I agree. Like, we can't let companies off the hook anymore. It's not one or the other. Like this, they are both part of the solution. And you have to support it for it to be successful, just like you would support any other program and like any other initiative at work. You wouldn't just say, oh, I'm not giving you a budget, I hope you're successful, we'll talk again in 6 months. So I don't know, but I know for some people, like it's really hard to go into, an all white leadership team and explain what challenges you're having, maybe as an ERG leader. And I like you keep referencing co-leads. I like that it's like multiple people, so it doesn't fall on one person.
But it can easily fall on one person, because in my experience of, and even working with other or consulting with other ERG leaders that I've known over the course of the past year, just to kind of figure out what are you doing for your ERG or what have you. And a lot of people were just saying, for the amount of money that I'm being, for the amount of money that they're giving me as an ERG leader, it's not worth it. It really is not. Doing ERG work, especially in the past few months that we've had since last year, I think that, it is emotional labor. It's emotional labor. And it also takes time, because you have to research speakers, you have to research venues, events, or whatever it is that you're trying to do, communications back and forth. It's pretty much, it's labor intensive. It's very time consuming. It's very emotionally draining and heavy. And oftentimes when you have nationwide disturbances like George Floyd, every single Black person in that organization, every single Asian person in that organization is looking towards their ERG leader as the answer to what are we going to do for our employees. And I don't think that, I think that it's great for leaderships to say, yeah, we have ERGs, but are you checking in with your leaders to know where they are? Because a lot of your leaders are tapped out. And, shout out to LinkedIn. I don't work for them, but they actually pay their ERG leaders 10 grand a year. Because I don't know why they do it. I do know why, but I can't speak on their behalf. If their decision to do so was for the very same reasons that I mentioned, kudos to them for being pioneers in doing so. I have not heard of many other ERGs to do the same. And again, not all organizations have the budget to do so. But whether you have the finances or not, I think that it's important for you to have those conversations with your ERG leaders in terms of what is the responsibility of the organization towards the people that they employ versus the responsibilities of these ERGs who are just fostering communities. You come in and we just welcome you and just let you know that, hey, we're here for you. Here are the resources that we have, but also understanding that ERGs do not replace DEI. They're part of your diversity and inclusion. They're part of the program, but they're not the entire program. It does not begin and end with them. And that's why I always say that if you have a well-oiled diversity, equity, and inclusion department, then there's no discussion as to where those roles sit. Employees are able to just come together, gather under whatever, guise they choose to, without having to worry about being responsible for a lot of the heavier stuff that should be, managed by paid employees or people who are specifically paid for those purposes.
It's really good. I hope that everyone who watched this is now gonna take all their notes that they furiously took while we were all talking back to work and start championing some of these efforts, because DEI is really a hot topic right now for all the reasons that you said, and some companies are going to get it right and some companies are not doing it for the right reason. But like, this is a tool that you can put in your tool belt while you're looking at how are you gonna build this function within your organization. I think you and I were talking one day, and it might have turned into a Twitter conversation about organizations wanting somebody with all these years of DEI experience, but like, that's not something that we've cast as a position for 20 years. So you're not going to have that I mean, you'll have that organic knowledge that people just know because they've studied it or because they've lived it or because, they have seen it as a people need for longer than organizations have. But you can't bring in somebody who's got 20 years of experience in DEI for all of these organizations. So these are the type of things that you can build from the ground up towards getting it right.
And it's so interesting that you mentioned that, because I was talking to a former colleague of mine who recently, just like myself, got certified and got her DEI certificate. And her male manager told her, you don't need to get a certificate. You're a Black woman. You have your lived experiences. And she was like, yeah, I know, but I still wanted to get certified. And I looked at her and I was just like, well, wasn't that easy for a white man to say? Like, who on earth hires people based on their lived experience?
Your lived experience is proof of certification.
And it's just like, and interestingly enough, the industry has been around since, I'm horrible with years, but I would love to say the 1970s, if not 60s. However, very few are the organizations that have adopted it as a discipline and has actually invested in it for as long. I think I can name a lot of the larger corporate organizations that have, I would say that I'm knowledgeable of, that have been doing it for the past 15, 20 years. I'm in the DC metropolitan area. I can name a lot of companies that do, but when you're looking at mid-size or much smaller corporate organizations, when you're looking at the nonprofits, it has not really been the case. And now I think that, the happenings, the racial reckoning that has been transpiring over the course of the past few years. I remember when in 2015, I was working for a marketing and branding agency. Oh my, I was working for an organization at the time, and you, as a Black woman, Jasmine, I'm sure you remember half of everything that was happening across the nation during that time. And the organization that I worked for didn't say a peep about anything racial. But then the former president at the time made a disparaging comment towards the LGBTQ community, and they made a statement there. And so now, as we all know, in the past year, we have all of these, promises that are made to employees of color, and, ERGs and monies that are, just going, we're investing, we're putting in money here, there, what have you. And so all of that was a hot topic last year, but an even hotter topic now is the amount of employees of racial background or just, seasoned colleague employees or what have you, that are just looking at organizations and saying, so I've really been doing this for 30 years. Yeah. The corporate world has nothing new to offer me. I'm out. Making those transitions. And I think that I'm not saying that ERGs are the answers to that, because it's not. It's deeper than that. But somehow it gives staff, an even easier way to come together and really discuss, oh, wait, I was going through that. You went through that too. Oh, wait, and you. Maybe there is cause for us to come together and advocate for, the group at large. It allows us to identify the issues that affect people across the org, or just come together about things that we really like about the org. And that we want to celebrate about the org. That way, when colleagues come into the organization, we can say that, hey, this is how we've been supported, and this is how you two are going to be supported and supported. And so I think that it's about the narrative that employees tell about the program and how it is supporting them, because ultimately that's as receptive as they will be and welcoming to your incoming staff, or even talking about their experience within the organization, be it on the social media platforms, what have you, and making people want to come work for your organization. And so I think that you can't check the box anymore. You have to get real about your programming. And the only way you can get real with it is by getting in the trenches with the people who are doing the work to find out what are the things that are important to you. Like, you can't have ERGs and not have executive sponsorship where you as a leader come in and say, oh, the council's meeting this month. Let me hop in and see what y'all are talking about. Or is there anything that the leadership team can support you with? Hey, I am a department leader, and it's great that you all have this ERG, because I know it can be difficult for the 3 people on my team that are the only ones. And I just came to say thank you for making them feel welcome in an organization that could have, in a situation that could have been intimidating for them, or otherwise not experienced as well as they are right now. And so I think that it's not just about having them and leaving them to their own devices, but you also have to check in and find out when they need a little bit of watering, or when they need a little bit of sunshine, anything that they need to help them to continue to grow, to develop. And it might also be you tapping into your leadership connections and saying, in fact, you know what? I'm gonna tap into someone, a highly paid executive that I know, that I used to work with, and ask them if they'd be willing to come in and meet with your ERG. Those are ways to compensate for not always having budgets. There are creative ways to go around that, but just because it's creative does not mean that your ERGs have to do all the legwork. As a leader, step in sometime and say, you know what, this is how I'm gonna help, or how can I help you? It makes a world of a difference.
I am going to end it right there as a mic drop moment. Like, I got to figure out a way to edit a mic drop in here, because I feel like that was the perfect way to end tonight's episode. That just summed it up in a nice little gift present. And hopefully you all truly listen to what was said tonight and will receive the information that was given, and figure out a way to start your own, or make sure the ones that you have at your organization are better supported. So, Natasha, thank you so very much for joining us tonight on BakedHR. This was an amazing conversation, and we say that a lot, but tonight, y'all, like, I've never worked in an organization that really had an ERG, so this was very much a learning experience for me, and I hope it was a learning experience. Well, Christina and I both hope it was a learning experience for all of our BakedHR watchers. So make sure that you are following us on Instagram at BakedHR. We have some funny memes posted every Monday. We try to go live on Sundays at 7 p.m. Central. We need to find out what you all want to hear from us. To have more episodes like this. We have a few more guest sessions booked. So if you would like to come on BakedHR with us, then make sure you send us an email at bakedhr@gmail.com. And then, of course, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. An episode will drop for season 2 every Wednesday at 3 p.m. So thank you all for joining us tonight. This was so amazing. Thank you, Natasha. Have a great night, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.